We have kicked off the celebration of St. Louis's 250th birthday. But where's this party going? Who's invited? What's with all these cakes? And why are so many people going to so much trouble about this? What does our past have to do with our future?
And on Stay Tuned, you drive the discussion. We bring local experts, journalists, and civic leaders together to have tough conversations for a stronger St. Louis. Tweet us your insights on tonight's topic, and you've got a seat at the table. With a few national experts and a panel of community members, this is the show bringing more light and less heat to the issues that matter. So stay tuned.
Good evening, I'm Jim Kircher. Casey Nolan, still in Russia covering the Olympics. That's not a bad thing to do. This is Erin Buddy. She's the executive director of STL 250. I know, now you've been at this for a while, planning all of this stuff.
Absolutely. There's been a group involved for about the last 4 years.
And most of them volunteers, right?
All of them volunteers, yep.
So tell me, I know it has to be more than about a party, and we're going to show some of the things that you guys have already done over the weekend. But, you know, this is the question, what do you hope to accomplish? Is there a goal? Are we supposed to come out of this better than when we went into it?
So if you look all the way back to 2009, when the Missouri History Museum really got us started as our founding partner. They pulled together a really diverse group of folks from throughout the region to answer that question. You know, what is the right way
and
to
they
mark?
argued about it, right?
Well, of course they did. I mean, with the diversity of this region and the diversity of those perspectives, there should be an argument. But what they really did come to consensus on is that there are so many amazing things throughout the St. Louis region that a celebration needs to be able to accommodate, featuring all of them. So how do you structure this 250th celebration, you know, of this milestone in a way that really does highlight all of the region's assets? Because if we can do that, and if we could connect more people who live in St. Louis and who visit St. Louis to those assets, to appreciate them more, to learn about them more, we really think that we can increase civic pride, and that's our goal.
There's this sense of and you've got some studies about people feeling attached to their community. Yeah. What makes people feel they belong, they're invested, they're rooted, they're going to stay? Is that part of this?
That's exactly it. So civic pride, I think, in a lot of people's mind can be kind of a elusive concept. It can be fluffy on one side, it can be boosterism on another side. We found this great research that the Knight Foundation had done across 26 very diverse communities that said if enough people feel good enough about 10 indicators that range from do I feel welcome here to do I have social opportunities to are my basic services good to are our citizens involved, if those things have a high level of satisfaction, your attachment to the community is going to be stronger. Communities with higher levels of attachment perform better on all of the indicators of community health that this region and every other region puts a lot of effort behind.
I think that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about tonight, as well as just some interesting parts about the history. But first, I want to let people see, if they missed it, some of the things that happened on the weekend that kicked all of this off.
Great.
And the first thing I want to say after we did the introductions is I want to say happy birthday, St. Louis.
The kickoff of the city's 250th anniversary got off on schedule last Friday, but not exactly as planned. This news conference with the mayor, the county executive, Forest Park Forever director, and STL 250 boss was supposed to take place in Forest Park before the Burnin' Love Festival. But icy weather forced postponement, and the kickoff of the events and the Cakeway to the West birthday cake project, that had to be moved to City Hall.
250 of these will be located throughout the 15-county bi-state region. They represent the places we love most, the places that are landmark sites that are important to us in terms of history and culture.
The Cakeway project has its own phone app that helps you find the cakes and read about why they're there. It's a kind of historical, cultural scavenger hunt. But this was just the start of things.
And the city is born.
On Saturday in City Hall, the founding of St. Louis was reenacted on the steps of the rotunda.
1863, Chouteau and Pierre Leclerc, with 20 oarsmen, rowed more.
In some ways, it felt like a really old-fashioned kind of civic celebration, but there were important differences. The diversity of the early settlers, this wasn't political correctness, this was historical correctness. And the Osage Indians were recognized as key to St. Louis's success, and today's chief was an honored guest and speaker. After all, he also has a Chouteau in his family tree.
There are many families within the Osage that married intertwined with the French.
Osage women set up processing centers for deer hides, turning out thousands of buckskins a year.
And so that St. Louisans and tourists can be reminded of the city's French origins when these celebrations are over, there will be new signs downtown showing the French names that Pierre Leclerc had given his streets. There were some reenactors that day at the south leg of the arch where it all began, but the real kickoff party, open to everybody, that was Tuesday night on Art Hill. The theme was still Burnin' Love, even though it had been moved from Valentine's Day because of the weather. But despite that delay, everything was still in place. The food tents, the stage, the entertainers. Couples were getting engaged or re-engaged, and there was the big burnin' heart. All of this, just the kickoff to a year-long celebration of what many are calling just the first 250 years. So let's talk about what's going on and maybe some of the challenges. Erin Buddy is joining us at the table here with Denise DeCou. She's the founder and principal of Loretta's Work. She does a lot of work with inclusion and diversity, and you've been a co-chair on a couple of the committees with STL 250, the Programs History Committee, and the Diversity Committee. And Andrew Wanko, who's with the Missouri History Museum, which has a great exhibit 250 and 250 going on all year long. Erin, I want to go back to you first of all because a couple of weeks ago I was telling people about what was coming up with the 250, and I was telling them about stuff, and they were going, yeah, I hadn't heard that. I hadn't heard that. Are they hearing it now?
I think absolutely. I think that once you have events and tangibles,
and you light a big heart on fire.
And you light a big heart on
Yeah.
fire, and you have those kind, and you bring Pokey Lafarge back.
Right.
You know, you really do. You get an easier story to grab onto, and the coverage has been outstanding. Our approach all the way along from the beginning was really to make sure the grassroots was involved. So we have been out there making presentations to chambers of commerce, to fraternal groups, to lodges, to schools, really spreading the word. We did outreach directly to about 3,000 organizations across the 15-county bi-state region, inviting them to become official celebration partners.
That's the stuff
so
that
we've been building.
Yeah, that's the stuff that really doesn't show up. I do want to encourage people to join this conversation because they may have something to say about all this. Hashtag stay tuned, STL. Let me talk to you guys because Andrew, you're a public historian. I'll have to ask you what exactly that means. And Denise, this question of diversity, we always run the danger that this is going to be, let's say, sort of a country club affair, right? We've got corporate sponsors, we've got the people who fund things and they step up. I'm hoping that's not what it's turning out to be.
No, well, in co-chairing the history committee, one of the things that we did was to ensure that we had a diverse group of people at the committee meetings, and that we were going to be able to engage people across the community in celebrating this 250th anniversary. And so there were opportunities for individuals to apply, to showcase their events. This really is a celebration of the people of St. Louis, and so there are many opportunities going into our website for STL 250 to be able to join in, participate, and celebrate.
Yeah, this isn't just about parties and stuff. There's a lot of things going on in the community. It's on the STL 250 website. Channel 9, by the way, the 9 Network is a media sponsor. We're involved in this as well in our own way. We want this to be diverse. We want this to be community-wide. Andrew, how do you accomplish that?
I think one of the key things that STL 250 has absolutely done correctly is the idea that the people of St. Louis are coming up with their own events. It could be things that they've been doing for years that is particular to their neighborhood or their community group. Or it could be brand new things that they're coming up specifically with for the 250th anniversary celebrations. But the key with that is not, here, we're gonna produce this thing for you, we're gonna feed you this forgettable thrill. It's that they are responsible for making connections with each other. I think the biggest hope is that neighborhoods and community groups are going to make connections with other neighborhoods, community groups, interest groups, and start cross-cultural, interest gap filling.
Yeah. Do you guys see that happening?
Yes, well, we were very intentional in our committees to ensure that we were bringing in the voices of people from all across the St. Louis region.
I mean, people were always worried their story's going to be left out of this, right?
Right. And so we've created opportunities for youth to become involved, for grassroots organizations to be involved, not-for-profit organizations, the corporate community, as well as our arts and cultural institutions. And so we have extended invitation. We have actually created access and provided resources for anyone who is interested in becoming involved to do so. And we're also looking for individual stories. We want the people to be able to tell the stories of their history, of their families, going generations back.
Is that what people are saying if they're hearing about this? Are they now coming? I know, Aaron, you guys, all of you were trying to get people involved. After this gets going, do you get some new people coming in saying, hey, can we do this? Can we do that?
Yeah, it's been really exciting to see the people stepping forward now that they have seen things going on and know that we're going to be continuing. But it does date all the way back to, was it February, Andrew, when we launched the Facebook page?
Yeah,
Those
a year ago,
stories,
right?
yeah, and that involvement from this day in St. Louis history and this birthday of the day, people have been sharing their stories with us through Facebook for 12 months.
I've got to ask you about the cakes before I forget.
Okay.
250 cakes spread throughout the entire metropolitan area, not just St. Louis City. You're a little behind schedule, I imagine. Weather was not helping you out?
Yep, so we hit our schedule to announce the 250 locations during the birthday weekend, and so now we're getting them installed, and what we're finding is it's actually creating some really nice buzz as people are finding new cakes that are getting installed every day. We have about 70 out there, but going back to your conversation about diversity and community involvement, we were very, very deliberate in the process of choosing where these 250 cakes would go so that we could make sure that they represented the 15-county bi-state region. So we had geographic dispersion, we had diverse group dispersion, we had different heritage and faiths and cultures considered, as well as natural and built environment. So we were very mindful of, if we're going to mark 250 places and help tell a story, and it's really just one story of St. Louis, that would be the most diverse story that we could possibly tell.
I've seen the list. It's an interesting list. A couple of my nominations made it. It wasn't
That's great.
Other people, I imagine, nominated the same things. I'm wondering for all of you guys, at the end of the year, and we're talking really the end of 2014 for this 250th anniversary, what does success look like to you guys at the end of this year? What do you want to see done?
I think success for us is going to look like vast communities engaged in this celebration of 250 years and the telling of stories of people from very diverse backgrounds on their lives here, the celebration of their families, of the histories that their families hold, and the opportunity for them to be able to share that with others. It's a rich story, and one that so many communities get to tell about their founding, about why people live where they live and what's important about that.
Andrew, for you guys, I mean, besides getting a lot of people to come through the museum, right?
Yeah, I think just speaking personally to me, the one thing that I hate to say is a problem in St. Louis is we are a city of harsh divisions, and that has always been a problem for St. Louis. So if even one person sees this stuff and discovers some sort of flavor they didn't know their city had, or finds a reason to go into a neighborhood they had never been in before in their lives. As as a kid who grew up in the county and sort of from a young age was sort of afraid of the city, now like coming in and fully embracing the city, I kind of understand that feeling of discovering, I didn't even know this was here.
And I think the cakes will really help that.
And absolutely, yeah. So if this can become a tool, if people can see these things on the sidewalk and all of a sudden notice something that they had walked past a million times before and not ever taken notice, that would be the ultimate goal for me.
We're going to talk more about history. We're going to talk about divisions. We're going to talk with Charlie Brennan, who's really one of the history champions in St. Louis. I also wanted to, because I love this story, the pageant in Mask from 100 years ago, because those folks doing the same thing that we're doing today, trying to do something that has some impact. So we're going to take a look at that. It was an event designed to bring together the people of St. Louis. The pageant and mask was staged in Forest Park in 1914 to mark the 150th anniversary of the city's founding. Parks official Charlotte Rumbold was one of the driving forces behind the pageant and mask and getting as many people as possible involved in the production and in the audience.
The city that plays together will work together.
And the idea behind that was very self-conscious. If we get people to come together and work on a project like a big 4-day event, and form committees and get costumes and do all the organization that's involved in that to celebrate our city, then we will work together on other more serious problems in the city. And she believed that very strongly.
Art Hill became an outdoor theater with a huge stage constructed in the lake. A cast of thousands presented the history of St. Louis from the mound builders on. Over 4 days, 400,000 people came to watch. There hadn't been such a gathering in Forest Park since the World's Fair 10 years before. So now we're going to turn to the historians. You guys are going to have to stop me here because I could talk with you guys all night long. John Wright, an old friend of mine, historian, written a lot of books, especially about African American history in St. Louis. Kristen Anderson, history professor over at Webster University. Here's the interesting thing. When I first I went to the history committee meeting quite a while ago. John, you may have been there as well. And the historians and the teachers were saying one of the problems we have today is that we're not teaching local history anymore. St. Louis history, Missouri history, Illinois history. Do you guys agree with that? And if you do, is it why is that?
Well, I think we've excluded social studies basically from our curriculum because of other pressures. You used to have, was it 3rd grade or 4th grade in elementary school used to be local history. You did local, state, and then national in that order. But now we've kind of excluded those from the textbook, and we put more emphasis on testing and social studies based on the tests.
Kristen, when you get students, how familiar are they with, they've probably taken American history and a world history, how familiar are they with local history? You don't only just have local students or Missouri students, but...
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, it varies a lot. Even the students who are from St. Louis, who I teach a course on St. Louis history, and even the ones who are from St. Louis, they say, I grew up here my whole life. I didn't know most of this stuff, which, it's gratifying. I get to teach them something new, but yeah, at the same time, they feel like they don't know that much.
Yeah, let's talk about what's the value? Somebody said, well, who cares, right? It's history, it's fine. If you like it, you'll read it. If you don't like it, forget about it. But why, what's the value of this to people?
It kind of explains where we are today. If you know where you've been, it kind of gives you a roadmap of how you got to where you are and how you continue on the journey. And I think so many people are confused about where they are presently. Therefore, it's hard for them to make the leap in a reasonable way to the future.
And a lot of times people think, well, nobody has ever dealt with what we're dealing with today, right?
Yeah, inevitably. Past doesn't literally repeat itself, but it does tend to rhyme a lot,
constantly.
right? Like Mark Twain said. No, I feel like teaching St. Louis history to people who are living in St. Louis, if I can help them to understand how their communities evolved over time, the problems that we faced in the past, the problems that we face today, that potentially can help them to, be better citizens of the community that they live in going forward.
John, I have a question for you. I think one of the issues as STL 250 moves ahead with this idea that everybody should be part of this, that everybody should be attached to this community and feel a part of this community. But my question is, I'll ask for a generalization, do African Americans feel less invested, less attached because they feel they've been left out of this story?
Oh, I think most times, most of our books, if you pick up books at the bookstore about the city, many times the earlier books were not included. And so it's kind of hard. It's almost like if you have a family reunion and you have an album passing around about the family and your family's left out and you're supposed to be excited about the album. I think that's often what happens often in St. Louis. I was at a meeting not only with African Americans, I was at a meeting at the old courthouse where the Osage Indians were there, and they said it should have been 4 flags rather than 3. We've been left out so much, they said, in history. We need to be included when we tell the history of the story. So it's so many groups who have been a part of St. Louis who have been left out, not only African Americans. It's been a European type history, and all other ethnic groups have been excluded.
The thing that fascinated me about doing the work that I've been doing with the founding of St. Louis was that realization that in the early days, the African Americans, the Indians, free and enslaved, both Indians and blacks, this multicultural, diverse community. That to me is one of the great advantages of celebrating this birthday, is that we learn that this was not always a German, Irish, Italian, Polish city.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. St. Louis has been extremely racially and ethnically diverse throughout its history, and so for me, that's one of the things that really drew me to study St. Louis. It's a fascinating part of its history.
Working on a book now, Ethnic St. Louis, for Webster University Press. We have 100 ethnic groups we're looking at, and you don't realize how many groups live in St. Louis, exist in St. Louis, and are part of the St. Louis fabric, until you begin to look at all these groups that are there, and most of us don't know it because they're not mentioned, discussed, and that information isn't shared.
Are you guys excited about the STL 250, the potential for it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Could have great potential.
How so? How do
I
we
think
move forward?
what happens,
We've had a party, and they've done a great job on that.
The party's just starting.
Right.
And so I think at the end, the more we bring other groups in and share the information, we may be able, after this is over, look at St. Louis in a different way.
How so? How should we be looking at it?
Yeah. Well, to me, I think that it involves, again, this approach to diversity, because I feel, which I love to see them starting the celebration with an acknowledgement of St. Louis's diversity, because I feel like you can't understand the history of the city without understanding race and without understanding ethnicity. And so to me, that's what I would like to see come out of it, is that it provides opportunities to have conversations about the experiences of different groups of people that together make up the community.
Yeah, and what's interesting is in one of the previous shows that we did was the idea that today, for a lot of people coming here, diversity is not something you move away from, but something that you embrace. Can all of this work together? I mean, John, you've been around a while, so have I. Do you feel that that's beginning to change?
I think when people begin to see diversity as a strength rather than a weakness, I had a chance to travel when I was on the U City School Board. We had a project where you had national neighbors, and all those cities that were succeeding saw diversity as a strength rather than a weakness. Many communities we have in St. Louis still don't talk about their diversity because they don't want people to know they're diverse, because they feel the white population won't move there. So they see diversity as a weakness and not a draw.
And yet it's always been there, always will be there, and I think we're going to learn a lot about this. You guys stick around. John Wright, Kristen Anderson will continue this conversation in a little bit. Thanks.
Out here in St. Louis, you make the task of planting a tree very simple and very easy. If I thought it would have the same effect on all my other tasks, I would be in favor of that proposal that was made some years ago to move the nation's capital from Washington to St. Louis. Those who know St. Louis well and know it affectionately, as I have for many years, since I wore my first set of Buster Brown shoes, you know that the strength of this city comes from its colleges and its churches and the courageous civic leadership of its citizens. This city and this campus and the other centers of higher learning are now and will continue to be in the forefront of our nation's leadership in this new age of science and technology.
So feel free to join the conversation, hashtag stay tuned STL. I've asked Charlie Brennan from KMOX Radio and Donnie Brook to be on, because I said if we're going to talk local history, and we'll have the historians, we'll have the STL 250 planners, but I want to talk to a guy who, Charlie, I kind of see you as a champion of local history. Is that a good tag for you?
Well, I don't know about champion, because that indicates success or something. But you know, when I first moved here from Boston in 1988, I didn't think that St. Louis had any history. I mean, how could it compared to the Athens of America, as we called ourselves? But the more I was walking around St. Louis, I found out here's where Lindbergh asked for his money. Here's where Dred Scott sued. Here's where Mark Twain lived and worked. And I was just blown away by all the history of the city of St. Louis.
But also, I think to some extent, the lack of awareness, or I would even say pride in that.
Well, it's true. I mean, we always considered ourselves a beer town, for sure, baseball town, right? You know, but
World's Fair town.
World's Fair town, but
Sure.
history. You know, when I first moved here, there was not even a plaque outside the old courthouse in downtown St. Louis on any of the four sides indicating that that's where Dred and Harriet Scott sued for their freedom in 1846. And Ken Burns of PBS says that's the spark that started the flame, or the bonfire of the Civil War. I mean, started in our own backyard, and we had not marked it. Well, there's a plaque there now and a statue of Dred and Harriet, and we're making progress, you know, in areas like that.
I'll give you another example. My older brother came, and he's a history guy. He goes to libraries. He does a lot of reading. He came to St. Louis, found City Hall beautiful. He's looking for the walking tour.
Yeah.
He's looking for the walking tour map. There's no walk. Now, this was a few years ago. Maybe there is one now. And he was just shocked that a city this old wouldn't have a walking tour.
Oh my goodness, yeah, it's true. You know, we've got a long way to go there, but Chicago has probably 2-3 tours leaving every hour at the downtown location or something. But here's the deal, I think, and some of your guests have taken a look at this earlier. Unlike some of our cities and towns in this country, like maybe Boston or Plymouth or Philadelphia or Rhode Island, some of these cities were started by people who were seeking freedom from religious or political persecution. St. Louis was founded for fur trade, so it was just a place to make money. You know, legacy and exceptionalism really wasn't part of our outlook. And then, as some of your previous guests have said, some of our history has been so divisive, like the Civil War and segregation. I think a lot of people have wanted to kind of forget it.
And I do think there's this sense of, rather than saying, and this was, if that's part of our history, that's part of our history. let's talk about
Yeah,
it.
oh, yeah.
Let's deal with it, right?
Yeah.
And what kind of response? Oh, wait a minute. Before I get to there, you've got a book out about St. Louis history.
I do. It's called Amazing St. Louis, 250 Years of Great Tales and Curiosities, and it's kind of a rah-rah greatest hits of St. Louis history.
Good bedside book. I have to tell you, it's a good bathroom book.
Yeah,
I mean,
there you
it's
go.
a page or two
Absolutely.
Of really, really interesting stories. I wonder the response you have gotten over the years of pointing these things out to people who maybe should have been doing it all along.
Oh, well, everyone's really proud to know that St. Louis had so many great inventions, for example, and so many firsts, and so many people here whose actions changed the world, whether it was Jimmy Doolittle or Butch O'Hare in World War II, or Mark Twain with literature, and Chuck Berry with rock and roll, Dred Scott with the Civil War, and the list goes on. And so when people hear about that, they go, yeah, St. Louis is a place where people, changed the world, made a difference, and they feel proud of that. And that's my whole point. If you learn about your history, you'll feel proud of your region, and you might also be inspired by the actions of others to do great things like they did.
So how do you sense how STL 250 is going? I mean, you get a lot of phone calls.
Yeah.
People are talking to you all the time. Do you get a sense that it's catching on? Because like I said to Aaron a few weeks ago, people were saying, really? I didn't know. I didn't hear about that.
Among other things, I think that the birthday cakes is a great idea where people can use the app, find the birthday cakes, and then learn more about the area that those birthday cakes mark. So people have kind of there's a little learning curve there, because to be honest with you, I don't have my app yet, Jim, but I'm going to get that and use that. And I think that's kind of cool, combining history with this new technology. I think it's going to be really handy.
You like history, I like history. Neither of us was born here, by the way.
Right, that's right.
And I think that's an advantage, because you see things that people drive right by and they don't notice. What about this idea? And I'm not saying that kids aren't learning history. I know at the old courthouse, kids are going down to the old courthouse, Missouri History Museum, they do things. There are things going on where kids are being taught history. Do you get the sense that we ought to do a better job of that?
Yeah, definitely. For example, my kids study and they memorize The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow.
Still, really?
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Good poetry. I love it. Yeah. But we have two great poets that who actually you could memorize the poetry as a kid in grade school of T.S. Eliot, Maya Angelou, Eugene Field. I mean, we've got some local poets whose literature is recognized worldwide for sure.
I'm not sure I want to memorize T.S. Eliot.
Well, I think that you might enjoy doing that. Don't forget.
Maybe the cats thing.
The cats, absolutely. Yeah.
But I tell you what, this is one of those things that I think, and I don't, I love living here, but I've often felt that, for example, there's sort of an embarrassment about Tennessee Williams.
Oh yeah. Well, not only
as
Tennessee
opposed
Williams.
To pride of the fact that he was recognized as a writer, he was mentored here as a writer, he had a terrible family life, but St. Louis sort of feels embarrassed. Like, let's not talk about that.
I think you're absolutely right. Well, first of all, because of his, I think he was gay, and that bothered people back in the day, but he was, I think, the most important playwright of the second half of the 20th century, won 2 Pulitzer Prizes. Glass Menagerie is running on Broadway right now. Now, there is a bust of Tennessee Williams, but that's in the Central West End at Euclid and McPherson. The big Tennessee Williams Festival every year, you're right, is in New Orleans. And there are some others that we've failed to recognize. Chuck Berry is one. Yes, he had some issues with the law for sure, but Chuck Berry invented rock and roll, and he still lives and works here. And then Miles Davis, we finally got Miles Davis, his statue last summer, right, in Alton. Right. But, Nice, France had a statue of Miles Davis about 50 years ago or something, a long period of time.
So I'll ask you what I asked Aaron and the other folks. At the end of the year, what does a successful birthday celebration look like to you?
Oh, I think if just people start realizing the great history in St. Louis, I think we'll have made some real inroads. If people become proud of our region, start thinking of it as a historic area where great people walked these same sidewalks and their actions made the world a better place, changed the world, I think we'll be heading in the right direction.
Great. Charlie Brennan, thanks for joining us. You've done a great job on promoting and really informing a lot of people about local history. We're going to see what some of the people are saying on Twitter about this.
Sounds good.
So let's continue this conversation. We've got the professors still hanging out over there and the organizers over there. This is our community table with Randy Vines, Joe Wilson, Sarah Thompson, Barrett Taylor. I'll throw this out to you. Anybody care about this?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Why?
It's fun for our city because I don't think we have very many things that we look at and like, yeah, no, we're doing okay. We're a city with a lot of history. We're a city with a lot of culture, despite what a lot of other people might think. And yeah, it's okay to be proud of something. It's okay to look at ourselves and think, yeah, we're doing okay. This is all right. We can pat ourselves on the back for this.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll echo what Joe said. I think very few cities can really claim to have such a rich, amazing history like St. Louis and reach that level of prominence that we reached. You know, for 110 years, St. Louis was a top 10 city in America from 1850 to 1960. That's incredible. It's a story that doesn't get told, and it's something that sadly current and future generations are losing touch with. They're not going to be able to appreciate that kind of history. And I think that throwing a huge birthday party, year-long celebration to celebrate the city that we live in, this great, amazing contribution to American culture, is a really great way to really boost to channel Scott Ogilvy, our civic self-esteem.
Do you think that really
sorry,
works?
I stole that before you.
You know, Aaron Buddy, the executive director, was talking about this idea of attachment and you know, doing this to make people, I guess, invested in their city. Is that something that you get a sense?
I mean, I'm probably a little biased because I was a history major as an undergrad, and I will hands down say that going to the Missouri History Museum growing up was a huge influence on something that Mr. Wright brought up about learning about African American history. I still remember this exhibit that they had about gospel music, blues music. I wasn't learning that in school, in high school, and
that was a time when people didn't consider that history.
Exactly.
Really.
And of course, when I got to college, you could take electives and different classes about that. But I mean, and I'm not trying to do this as a promo for the Missouri History Museum, but hands down, it had a huge influence on how I not only see this, what I learned there, saw there growing up, and thankfully was taken there by my parents, that, you know, I saw and learned about St. Louis history, and it was a huge influence. I still think about, you know, things even you've done, more footage. It's just, you know, and again, I'm going to say I'm biased. I love history, and I'm a history museum. I'm a big fan of history and the History Museum, but it has to do with when you're driving around St. Louis, knowing why people are in this neighborhood, when you look at this building, when even how we act, our attitudes, our behaviors, our consumer behavior comes down to the history of the city. It's so important. I think this is really bringing people together.
Okay, well, that's the question, because as John Wright was talking about the divisions in this city, is this something that can really overcome or help even bring to light some of these decisions? Barrett, what do you think?
I mean, if we acknowledge some of our actual history, you know, you talk about driving down streets. When you drive down Delmar, and on one side you have economic prosperity, on the other side you have some people who live in poverty. Or when you're driving when you're driving on Highway 70 past the Arch, and you think about Percy Green and what he stood for. I mean, it's great to talk about 250 years of history, but we have to actually acknowledge some of the issues that we still have today. I mean, we still
have.
You
think people aren't acknowledging?
Well, I think they said it at the beginning that we have a very like Eurocentric, and specifically like the English. You know, they come in. There's the 13 original colonies, and then we start moving west. Acknowledging that St. Louis is a much older city than most people would give us credit for. That we have French and Spanish heritage. That Florissant was founded by Spanish.
I think part of that is that we're so in love, and I think justifiably in love with the Lewis and Clark adventure, right? I think that's a great story. I mean, it was a great story when they came back, and I think that has kind of pushed aside all of that stuff that came before. There's an awful lot of good stuff that came before.
Definitely, and I think it's really important to point out that, you know, St. Louis in many ways is kind of a microcosm of the United States at large. All these divisions and racial strife and political infighting and all of these things that are known to be St. Louis problems are really not just St. Louis problems. They're American problems. And there are things that, that apply to many cities in the United States, many major cities that are multifaceted and have different dimensions and layers of stratification throughout their history. So I think, acknowledging it, definitely doing our best to address it, and find solutions, common solutions to these issues is definitely a good thing. But I don't think it's very good to have this self-defeating attitude like we're some anomaly, that we're so much worse and so much more divided than most cities in America. I will reject that.
Well, I think it's also like critical thinking about it. And I think a great example, I was telling someone about the show tonight, and I was saying Bell Fountain Cemetery to me is like a great example of like history in the present and then history in the past. So here you have the cemetery of the wealthiest, some of the wealthiest St. Louisans buried there. But it's north of Mark Twain neighborhood in 2014 and Walnut Park, just to the west of it. And it's like, wow, there's gold in some of these little, some of in the burials there, and yet around it is some of the most high crime rate area in St. Louis. And so you have to look at it in the present for what it is, and then in the past. And I think it's just critical thinking about places in St. Louis, moments in St. Louis. You have to just look at it from two sides, and
Sarah,
that knowledge helps you.
Yeah, you said you went to the History Museum and you learned some stuff. What about the rest of you guys? Was there an awareness, whether you're newcomers or you've grown up here, of St. Louis history, and if so, how did you learn it? Does it take a personal initiative to learn it?
For me, this is anecdotal. My dad grew up on the north side of St. Louis, right by the Grand Avenue Water Tower, and he took my brother and I on a ride one time back in like the late 80s and pointed out where all the cool stuff used to be, the bowling alley, the shoe store, and he painted this picture that this city was so vibrant and diverse and active, and you could hop on a streetcar and go anywhere. And so it kind of, my brother and I became total St. Louis geeks, and we would look up where the city ranked on all the almanacs and like how big it was compared to Cleveland and all these other, and then we just kind of fell in love with St. Louis history, and then in turn urban history, and really realized after traveling that this city, really, they do not build cities this cool anymore. And we're so lucky to have it. And everywhere you turn in the city of St. Louis, you are reminded that this city was built to matter.
Yeah. Well, hang with us for a minute. This has been my opportunity to do some things I've always been interested in, and one of those is the old mines area down in Washington County. So we'll take a look at that. Then we're going to continue the conversation with everybody.
All right, we'll do one here for us. Something called Tu viens tu berger, which means old shepherd, where do you come from? This is a song I learned down in Potosi from Miss Ida Fortel.
St. Louis may have lost its Frenchness long ago. Not so the old mines area of Washington County, which celebrates its heritage at the annual Autumn Fete. This old lead mining area was long isolated, and French was commonly heard well into the 20th century, and maybe being heard a little bit more now in the 21st. Because the language, at least the Ozarks French they spoke here, is making something of a comeback, and musician Dennis Stromat is part of that revival.
I showed up here about 23 years ago, and I was just a student down at Southeast Missouri State University. I came here mainly because I was just really interested in the local French heritage. I was interested in mainly to hear the language. I wanted to hear the French language. I didn't even think much about the music. But what happened was music is really much a part of the tradition here. And when I started going to house parties, or bouillon parties, people were not only singing songs in French, but they were, music was happening. And essentially, I learned to speak French through the music and through stories coming here.
Quand je dis on parle avec un accent, c'était plus grave qu'il a dit la France, c'est différent que le français qui en parle.
Mais we speak a little bit of a different French here. I learned to speak the French here. I do speak the French. And I do speak Old Mines French. And there are still people here that do, and there are people here on the grounds today that do. And we're always in danger of losing it, And I think basically we have to, you save a culture like this one generation at a time. Essentially what's happening, and right now it's my time.
Yeah, thank you. Merci tout le monde.
Okay, so we're going from old mines, French culture, to Sochi, Russia, I guess international world culture. I think we've dialed up Casey Nolan. Casey, hey, good to see you.
Good to see you, Jim. How are you?
I'm fine. You're putting in a lot of hours, I'm sure. You're covering the Olympics in Sochi now for the last couple of weeks and there for another week or so. I guess everybody wants to know, first of all, how's the hotel room, right?
I do get that question a lot, yeah. Mine's fine. I wish I had like a great story to tell, but no, mine's been great. People have been nice. Of course, there's some quirky differences, like when you travel abroad anywhere. But yeah, no, hot water, shower curtain, bedspread.
Now, I got to ask you, this is a huge media circus, or Olympics, I guess. How difficult is it for you to really get the story you want to get, or to see what you want to see?
Very difficult. Yeah, I think people might be surprised at how hard it is once you have one of these to actually get in and see events, because they don't have a ton of spaces. But the good news is we have some good partnerships, and this may sound a little PR-ish, but it's true, between NBC network folks who shot skating for us last night, because that was a hard ticket to come by, to USA Today folks. Channel 5 is part of the same company that owns USA Today. They either get us access or get us a lot of perspective. So while we may not be able to walk into every single thing we want to, we have free run of the park, free run of most of the venues leading up to the big events, like the women's final skate, and then we have some access to some good information, I hope.
Yeah, we don't have to do spoiler alerts, because if people are watching us, we can tell them who won. Gracie Gould, I guess, really good, but not quite good enough.
Yeah, good but not gold, I guess. The poor girl has an awesome name, but she's got to live up to it. Yep, she was fourth. I think the story you're going to see, maybe if you follow skating, for those who are interested, maybe a little controversy about the judging. I don't think Gracie was a victim of that, but the unexpected winner was a Russian gal who was very talented, but according to people who follow the sport year-round, not nearly as polished as the two people she beat, two young women she beat. So maybe a little controversy there.
Yeah, and of course, I guess the other big story for St. Louis was TJ Oshie being the star of that one game in the shootout.
Yeah, it's a lot of. I'm proud to be a St. Louisan over here. That's for sure. We got all the blues, not just TJ getting kind of like the Today Show and all of the publicity, but when you talk to the sports writers that follow hockey, our guys that we see in St. Louis, or we like to claim at least every 4 years, when they head off to the Olympics, are really leading this hockey team that has a shot to go for gold. They're going to play Canada. It's a big rivalry. Our women lost to Canada, but our men still can win and then go play for the gold. And then in terms of I said proud to be a St. Louis, and it just reminds me of just all the people I've met, actually, who you wouldn't expect to meet. Just about every day, it seems like I can meet someone with the connection to St. Louis over here.
9 hours time difference. How tough is it to come back and go back to work?
Well, that remains to be seen. I don't know. Yeah, but no, the time difference has been a challenge, mostly for my math skills, I think, more than anything. But yeah, it's been good for sure, Jim.
Great. Casey, thanks for joining us and taking the time from Sochi. We'll see you back here in a couple of weeks.
Well, thanks for all you're doing, Jim. I appreciate it.
Great. So let's get back. We've got everybody back here. So Aaron, I'm not sure you're going to get a word in edgewise here, so I'm going to come back to you because you've heard a lot of the conversations going on here. What are you thinking from what you've heard?
Not dissimilar to the conversations we've been having for years. So it's gratifying to hear the excitement, the potential, the love of history that everybody really has remarked on. The one thing I want to make sure we don't leave with is the fact that this history is really just a base and a background upon which we really look forward. Where are we going to go in the next 250 years?
Okay, that's your question to everybody else. Where do we go in the next 250?
We were just talking about this.
We were, and really, as history has informed our present, we're really looking forward to what we do in the next 50 years, so that our 300th anniversary will be one of making St. Louis even better. Right?
Yeah, I thought it was a great idea that you guys had for the time capsules or for the event to write in 50 years so that they would, reveal. And I think about even with my son, and I'm like, God, when I saw that as the event, I thought, I don't know if I'll be alive then, but I thought, if he's here, will the city look different? Will things be different? Will we still be talking about desegregation and like this and that for the schools and education? Will we be past that, in 50 years? That's really the first thing that came to my mind because I was like, oh, that's a great activity. I might not be alive, but my son probably will, or I hope he will. So it's like...
Historians, do we ever get past that stuff?
I think we can.
Yeah?
I do. And I don't think I'm just being hopeful. I think it is the kind of thing that, if we keep working towards it, that's what I'd like to see in 50 years, that we can be looking back on that as something that is history that doesn't necessarily inform our present so much anymore. Yeah.
Well, that's true. We're changing, if we think about where it was when I grew up, completely apartheid town. And I look at it today. If we look at what's happening all around the world, countries, and if you think about Du Bois' statement, over time, everything changes for the better. Time can be long, but it will change. It's not if it's going to change, it's when it's going to change. And I think looking at the past, where it's moving, it's escalating. And I don't think we're going back. I think the way it's moving now, we will be moving forward.
But do we still have apartheid schools, though? I mean, do we have schools that today, are schools diverse, or they're still black and white and
in some cases, it all depends on where we live. And we have relatives who steer people. We have to realize that people make money off of racism. And when you take the profit out of racism, it'll work out. But as long as there's money in racism, you're going to have that whole method of disbursement. And we have to work on that. You have to shine a light on it. When you find relatives who are not doing right, you point them out just like cockroaches. They run when you put the light on, right?
It's true.
Okay.
And our calendar, if somebody was going to go to our website and look at the events that have been registered, we've got some great conversations that are scheduled around race, around education reform, that groups have wanted to come together and have a really solid conversation and help move this forward as part of the 250th anniversary events.
That's the thing when we were talking about that. You can have a party and other parties and big stuff, but it's these conversations within the community. Denise, you know that, right? Real people talking to real people.
That's right.
Either disagreeing, agreeing to disagree, finding common ground. It takes place face to face, doesn't it?
That's right. It certainly does. And we're really excited about the youth who are involved in this celebration. They're living in a global world, a global environment, and they're much more accustomed to working across difference. They have relationships across difference, and I think we have great hope for St. Louis and for our country, really, in bringing young people together to lead us, really, in continuing to make St. Louis a better and better place.
You know what I'll say is there's no city that's ever going to be perfect and have it be problem-free. That's just a futile thing to strive for. What we can do is hope that we heal a lot of wounds that have been opened over the last 250 years here, and use this year, this birthday milestone, as an opportunity for self-reflection. What has this city done right? Where have we come from? Where are we now? Where can we go? And I think we just have a really remarkable urban city here with so many different characters and personalities, and so much potential, just bursting with potential everywhere.
I think failures are important. You bring up this thing, and we talked about this last week, that I think there's been a lot of successes, but people don't really talk about successes. They talk about failures. We do
talk
that
about
too
some
much.
successes.
Yeah.
I lived in University City for 43 years. When first moved there were great efforts on the realtors to frighten all the whites out. They fought back, and now it's one of the most diverse communities, and the real estate value, instead of going down, has gone up. Many of the kids who grew up can't afford to come back because of the real estate prices, because people decided they wanted to have that type of community, a diverse community. I had some Thai visitors who came and stayed with us. They went down the street, they came back to home with some Thai neighbors. And so it's
so true.
It's what people want.
I think you're right. I mean, there was a time when Temple Israel couldn't get property on Ladue Road or Clayton Road. When I first moved here 25 years ago, we didn't have a black mayor yet, a black county executive, hadn't had a black police chief or a black fire chief. And since the last 25 years, we've had all 4 of those. No one really knows where the future's going. I mean, if I asked you 10 years ago, do you think Anheuser-Busch will be owned by the Belgians? You'd say you're nuts. And would you say that, hey, in 2006, a kid from South St. Louis is going to invent Twitter, which will revolutionize the way people communicate? I mean, you just can't predict these things. No one really knows where we're going to be in 10 years, let alone 50.
Well, technically, he didn't invent Twitter. If you look at the history,
well,
that story is not.
We're splitting hairs.
I'm going with Jack Dorsey because he went with Bishop DeBoer.
We're going to continue this conversation online, 9net.org, but I want to continue with this idea that we've got people here who are invested in this community, who are interested in this community. This argument thing, I'll go back to Aaron, and early on, didn't you say, oh my goodness, how are we going to deal with this? Too many people, too many points of view. How are we going to get through with this?
So you make it as democratic as you can, and you set a table that has room for absolutely everyone. Hard problems don't solve themselves unless you focus on them. So yeah, if we focus on failure, then we're going to get better at it. We're going to get closer to the solutions. And you can't have those conversations without that broad and diverse participation. So we need all those groups on our calendar.
As we've all mentioned, there's so many stories, there is absolutely no way you can tell them all. What we tried to do is come up with a way to talk about the most diverse snapshot of St. Louis history we could possibly think of. So we have 50 people, 50 places, 50 moments, 50 images, and 50 objects, all in one gallery. Each one's about 200 words, so it's just small enough you can digest it, but it's large enough that it can satisfy you and you can really get an idea of what's happening. And for the place, we wanted to talk about things that were both obvious and hidden. We wanted to talk about things in St. Louis history that were serious and fun. And we wanted to talk about things that St. Louis is not only proud of, but also things that we are and rightfully should be ashamed of. And really, nothing was left off the table.
I always ask this question when I talk to groups about history, and I say, we look back at these stupid decisions people made 50 or 100 years ago. What stupid decisions are we making today that they're going to be looking at and saying, what were they thinking?
A lot. Can we state honestly?
Whatever you'd like. Sure.
Ballpark Village is a very stupid decision. I think it was very poorly executed. And just,
But baseball stadiums only last 45 years, so
correct,
in 45 years we'll have a new one.
We continue to repeat a lot of the same mistakes that we've made that we should have learned from by now. A missed opportunity is not removing the highway with the new Arch Grounds redevelopment. That progressive cities around the country have done away with their highways left and right. And why can't St. Louis? We just don't get it sometimes. And just the notion that you build a stadium or a convention center or an airport or all these big ticket projects, the Paul McKee Northside thing, that these silver bullet projects are just going to somehow infuse life into places that have lost it over the years. It's just not the way cities redevelop.
Yeah, but I always wondered too. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, just to piggyback on one thing that you said, just in terms of public transit, I think the mistake that we're making is not investing the right way in transit across the region. We made a mistake, a little over 100 years ago, stripping out all the streetcar rail from the city. We used to have a really extensive and really well-functioning streetcar system. We had a great public transit system that we decided to do away with so that we could invest more heavily in the automobile. And that was great for boom times for a while, but that doesn't really seem to be a sustainable model anymore. But we're not really turning around and reinvesting in public transit or trying to find something new to invest in, we're going to stick with the automobile. We're going to stick with that. And I think that's a mistake that's going to keep haunting us for a long time.
I think that really has to do with our polarization, you know, in the city, and that is an issue that we certainly have to look at. But I think in terms of this celebration, the 250th birthday of St. Louis, every individual who lives in St. Louis has the opportunity to have a voice, to create an opportunity to showcase themselves, their community, their initiatives, their schools, and I think we all have a part to play in that. And if we don't do it, then we certainly can't complain about the end of the year not having arrived at a different place. And so I think for each of us, we need to take up our own responsibility and our own authority to do that.
Well, I was going to say, it's interesting that you brought up Ballpark Village, because for the past 6 weeks, every day, every Thursday, I happen to be downtown and drive by, and there's protesters. They're African-American contractors who are standing outside Ballpark Village. And this isn't the time to get into that, but the idea is that they're not being contracted in the construction of that. And it made me think about, speaking of 50 years in a show we did here, when Percy Green protested about the St. Louis Arch and the construction on federal land, which is different than private, but because black contractors weren't being used. So you have this idea that there's something profound about what's going on, but then these other things just aren't changing, And so there's just this back and forth of this contrast where it's amazing. I think it's great. I was just saying to someone today, I can't wait to see what they do downtown. Flip side, yeah, I'd like to see those people also get employed. And is this really going to be the same thing 50 years? Are we going to continue to see this? So it's interesting that you brought that up, because I just was talking about that this morning with someone who works downtown, because I see them every when I'm there every week.
So 250th birthday, more reenactors and more discussion and arguments and observations. I think that's the key. I've always said, if people, and if they listen to Charlie, or they watch something on Channel 9, or they listen to a lecture or a symposium, if they then walk outside and look at their community a little differently, then I think that's a really good thing. Or if they come out of your class, that's what it is. So thanks everybody for joining us. This has been really, really fun. Thanks again.
Pleasure.
Thanks.